The S&P 500 made a new all-time high last week as alerted by the S&P 500 future, the ES, back in December 6, 2024. So this is no surprise to us. Right? We've been talking about this imminent new all-time high for the S&P 500 for weeks already. And here we're looking at the Dow Jones Industrial. Remember last week we say if we take out this pivot high here, we're basically putting the all-time high back in play. So as you can see, it is marching toward that 45,000 level. So be on the lookout for another possible new all-time high for the Dow Jones Industrial. But if it pulls back to this pivot high, that shouldn't be a surprise to us also. And just look at this as a retest of this pivot high breakout. And that would be somewhere around this 43,400 area. And for the New York Stock Exchange Composite, once again, they make this M bottom pretty much like you could call it a triple bottom here. And right now it's coming up toward this all-time high. So this all-time high at 20,300 could be back in play. And for the Nasdaq, it broke out of this what we call a bull flag. So we could see the Nasdaq come up and retest this all-time high somewhere around 20,133. So we have to wait and see, because the Magnificent Seven is getting a little weak, but this week the majority of them are going to be report earnings, and that could be a catalyst to help push the Nasdaq 100 either to a new all-time high or break down and dip below and head toward this 20,000 level. And from these chart of the indexes, you can see that only the S&P 500 actually closed with a new all-time closing high last Thursday. All the other indexes is still below the closing high. Although the Dow Jones Industrial is coming up and it is back above the 30-day moving average. Matter of fact, all the indexes are back above the 30-day moving average. So that's a positive. We just have to see, would it be able to come up and put this, their all-time high back in play and take out that all-time high and put in the new all-time high. Again, we have to remind ourselves about that January effect. If the month of January finished up, then there's a high probability that the year will also be ending on a positive. And here's the table of the performance from last week. As you can see, the Dow Jones Industrial was the best performer. It closed up the week at gain of 2.15%, and the transportation is the weakest performer and only closed up with a 1.06%. But again, if you look at this table here, all the indexes are up for the week and month to date and year to date. So we are seeing a positive market so far into 2025. For the 11th sector in the S&P 500, look at XLK, the technology actually made a new all-time closing high on Thursday. Now that's a heck of a comeback here. Remember a week ago or 2 weeks ago, it is below the 30-day moving average here. And now we are seeing it at the new high territory. And that is without a lot of the Max 7 stock showing much of a strength, especially Apple and Tesla. And here the consumer discretionary is also trying to make a comeback here. Got it back above the 30-period moving average. Likewise for the communication. And the retail is also coming back up again, on a above the 30-period moving average. The industrial is making a climb back toward the all-time high. And the energy got a little pullback last week, and that's probably basically because of Trump want the oil price to come down. Now in the long term, we're going to see price of oil going to come down. So, but right now, I think we might still get a little bit of a bounce. So it's all depends how forceful or determined Trump want the oil price to come down, how quickly, and what kind of pressure it will be try to put on, especially the Middle East, to lower the oil prices. But the consumer stable is still below the 30-period moving average, although it is coming off the bottom here. So we might see a little bit of a resistance up here at 78.50 area. And the healthcare actually came back up. So we got a little bit of a healthcare reversal here. So let's see a little bit of a beginning of a possible uptrend for the healthcare. And the utility is back up above the 30 moving average, likewise for the real estate and also the financial. And so we are seeing a lot of the sector turning back into positive uptrend here, or at least getting back above the 30-period moving average, other than the stable. So just keep an eye on the stable here. And here's a table showing the performance of the 11th sector. You can see that last week the communication is the top performer, with the energy being the worst performer. It's actually finished the week with a negative 2.82%. And also for the month to date and year to date, the stable is the only sector that is in the negative. Every other, the other 10 sector is in a positive. Looking at some of the key sector here, semiconductor finally broke out of this consolidation pattern here. So we'll see. Maybe it is coming up to hit this all-time high, because we also have NVIDIA reporting pretty soon. So we'll see how that get affected. But in addition to that, we also have this new AI DeepSeek that came out of China, and that might create a little havoc in the tech sector. So it'll be an interesting week. We also got the FOMC and everything else, so watch out. I think this week is going to be a volatile week. But in any case, we're going to trade what is in front of us. But right now, semiconductor seems to be look like it is breaking out of this consolidation pattern that has been sitting here for quite a few months. And also the oil is pulling back, and the processor and the explorer is also pulled back as well. But maybe this is just a little bit of a consolidation pullback. But we'll see how this will fare out in the coming week. And again, we see the biotech came back up and got above the 30-day moving average, and also the 30-day moving average is turning up a little bit, and that seems to be enforced by the XLV, the healthcare sector. And the gold miner is still hovering around at this low here, but it is turning a little bit upward. So maybe this is just a little bit of a bounce, and we'll see how gold is faring out in the coming week. And the banking sector is still holding on to its recent bounce here. So the bank and the regional bank is still positive above the 30-day moving average, although the 30-day moving average is still kind of descending or declining. So that's not a good sign. We want this thing to turn up. And also the home builder, even though that it came back up above the 30-day moving average, but that moving average is still declining. And likewise, looking at the bond, the long-term bond TLT, it is still going down. So like I said, I'm still looking for the possibility for the 10-year yield to hit that 5%. And here's how the key industry or the key sector performed last week. We see that the biotech actually was the strong performer for the week. That was up 3.51%, while the oil is the weakest, and it lost 3.5%. So for the year, only the long-term bond is negative. Everybody else is positive. So that is a good thing, and it kind of show you how resilient and the strength in the market right now. So I mean, things could change, right? But for now, the market look pretty positive. All right, let's take a look at the sentiment here. We're looking at the VIX here is down at 14.85 as of Friday. So definitely market participants are still being very complacent, and they are not fearful. And also looking at the put call ratio is below that 0.75, sitting at 0.6. So they are also, the market participants are also very bullish right now. And looking at some of the internal in the New York Stock Exchange, we're seeing a positive up-down volume ratio. So that's pretty good, even though on Friday, the S&P 500 was actually down, but the up-down volume ratio was sitting at positive 1.4. And so was the advanced decline. The advancing stock outnumbered the declining stock by 386. So we are seeing a little bit of a positive divergence here on the internal with the S&P 500. And also the new high, new low is turning positive, and that is a good thing. And we see that there are 91 more stock make new 52-week high than a 52-week low. And also we saw on Friday there was actually 100 stocks make new 52-week high, and looking at only 9 make new 52-week low. Now, the negative thing that we are seeing on the internal is the cumulative AD line. We are seeing a little bit of a negative divergence here. You see that the cumulative AD line is actually still below this peak here, while the S&P 500 closed at a new all-time closing high on Thursday. And look at the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq is pretty positive as well on the internal. We are looking at a positive up-down volume ratio, and also relatively most of the time last week, except on Wednesday, we saw that the advanced declines actually outnumber, the advancing stock outnumber the declining stocks. And in addition to that, we're also noticing there are more new 52-week high than 52-week low. So that is a positive as well for the Nasdaq. And similarly to the New York Stock Exchange, we are seeing a little bit of a negative divergence between the cumulative AD line in the Nasdaq versus the Nasdaq 100. So overall, we are seeing some improvement in the internal, but we are noticing some negative divergence between the advanced decline and also the index itself. So we got to be a little bit cautious here because we are approaching another new all-time high. So overall, the internal is getting a little bit more positive. Looking at this volume profile chart only for the ES, the SP 500, the E-mini SP 500 future, you see this huge balance area now. It's the broke out of this huge balance area and coming up to this, balance area up here. And we still have this all-time high that need to be tagged. So we're going to see this all-time high from the E-mini SP 500 to get tagged, and that also signifies that we should expect another new all-time high for the S&P 500. All right, let's take a look at the price action, starting with the ES. Notice last week we was talking about this pivot high here. We're saying that this pivot high, if it gets taken out, then essentially it is making a higher high. Then when we get a pullback, then we'd like to see this low being whole, and that will bring us a higher high and higher low, and that could put up in the starting of a new uptrend. But right now, we are more interested in to see will this all-time high get taken out by the ES in the coming week. And if that's the case, then we'll see another new all-time high for the S&P 500. Now, notice last week the price actually took out the upper range, and it closed just slightly above the upper range of the weekly expected move. And here's what the market is pricing in for the coming week. It is pricing in for the upper range of 6,220 and 6,211.25. And for the lower ranges between 6,052.75 and 6,025. So it is pricing in a new all-time high on the upper range, and the possibility of retesting this pivot high here on the lower range for the weekly expected move. So we'll be watching to see this upside scenario of taking out the all-time high and come up to this upper range. And this is also 0.5x of this particular balance area here. And here's the 1x extension of that balance area. So this 0.5 is pretty much in confluent with the upper range. So we'll be keeping an eye on the upper range. And on any kind of pullback, we'd be watching the low range. If the low range got taken out, then look for this high volume area with this 5982 basically below the 6,000 level. We could see the ES come back down and retest that 6,000 level if the low ranges get taken out. And for the SPY, we actually saw the SPY put in a new all-time high last week. It took out this all-time high here. And right now, we're basically looking for the possibility of continue to move up and take out some of these extension here on this balance area and put in another new all-time high as the ES pushing toward the new all-time high area. Now, again, the possibility of this pivot high get retested. And here's what the market is pricing in for the coming week. So you can see the market is pricing in a new all-time high here on the upper range. It's pricing in between 616.70 and 616. And also on the lower range is basically a little bit of a pullback to this pivot high here. And it is pricing in between 600 and 597. So the coming week, we'll be watching to see will the SPY push up to this upper range here at the 616 level. And then maybe we get a little bit of a pullback and come back and back test these pivot high here to find support. So we could see both sides of the range to get play next week, because we do have a lot of earning from the mega cap stocks and also the FOMC. So it'd be interesting to see what Powell have to say under the new Trump administration. And look at the NQ, the E mini Nasdaq 100 futures. You see that it finished right near the upper range of the weekly expected move, and also took out this pivot high here. So it is making a higher high. So once again, we'll be looking to see would it come up and take out the all-time high, or would it pull back and try to put in a higher low. Even though if it pull back, as long as it hold above this low, it will put up a higher low. And here's what the market is pricing in for the coming week. And the market is pricing in the upper range between 22,383.25 and 22,319.50 for the upper range, and the lower range between 21,496 and 21,350. So the scenario that we will be keeping an eye out is what to come up to this upper range and see would it be able to put in a new all-time high. Notice the market is not pricing in a new all-time high for the NQ. So that is important to observe here. So we'll see would it be able to push up to this all-time high, or will it come back down and be able to hold this lower range of the expected move and basically hold above this low. Now, if we break this lower low, this lower range, we could see a possibility of a move back down to this 20,445 area, this high volume zone, and basically these pivot low here. So that will be interesting to keep an eye on to see how the price action will play out for the coming week for the NQ. Remember, we're saying that there are a lot of mega cap tech stock reporting next week. So those are market moving stock. And here looking at the QQQ, the ETF for the Nasdaq 100, we see it's also close near the upper range of the weekly expected move and basically put in a higher high. Now for the coming week, it is pricing in an upper range between 541.30 and 539.80, and a lower range between 519.40 and 516. So we'll be watching to see would it be able to come up to the upper range. Now it's interesting to note the the contrast or the slight difference between the NQ and the QQQ. The market is pricing in the Q to put in a new all-time high on the upper range, while the NQ was slightly below the all-time high. Now also we're looking at the lower range here, and it's basically coming down, price it in to be below this pivot high. So we could see a back test of this breakout pivot high here. Now again, if we break this lower range, then we'd be looking at the possibility of the Q moving down toward this 496 or below the 500 level. If you find the video to be useful and informative, be sure to hit the like. You can find additional content from me in my newsletter, The Pulse of the Market on Substack. I have placed the link in the description below. Thank you for watching and good luck on your trading.